Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online PTS video with me, Sherman. Today guys, we're going to be taking a look at the Ice Staff changes coming with Markarth, and I'm going to give my thoughts and opinion on it. And we'll just go over that. Coming from somebody who learned to, or trained themselves to Ice Staff tank, and kind of mastered the art of it in the way that I found best for me to do it, I have to say that some of the changes that are going through this update, I don't agree with. Some I do. So let's go ahead and jump into the Ice Staff Destruction Staff changes, and we're going to go through every skill. We're going to talk about all the different changes and what's positive and what's negative about it, in my opinion. Now remember, my opinion is going to vary a lot from that of a more meta-type player, and that's because I don't follow the same kind of rules they do when it comes to playing a character in the end game, even with Ice Staff. If I'm going to use an Ice Staff, I'm going to use an Ice Staff primarily as my tool. It's going to be my main tool for tanking. So let's go ahead and talk about the Ice Staff skill changes. So before we get into the active skills, let's talk about the passive changes. So first off, Tri-Focus. The fully charged heavy attack now from this now grants you a damage shield for 4k, which is really good. While wielding a Frost Staff, blocking costs you Magicka instead of Stamina. Also a good bonus because it allows you some flexibility in there. I do like the Ice Staff for tanking, not for the idea of blocking, because I never blocked a lot with my Ice Staff. I didn't need to. I had shields that blocked pretty much 90 to 100% of all incoming damage I would take, even in trial situations, because of the way the build played. It played so well, and it was so defensive that I never had to sacrifice anything. Taking the taunt off the heavy attack was the right idea, because heavy attack charge time, if you look, is quite a bit. And to charge a heavy attack to hit an enemy, to get not only the damage shield but the taunt as well, is pretty much a pain in the butt for a lot of people. Now, for me, learning to do it on a constant, because it was the one thing that it was the one taunt that didn't have the problem the other taunts did. You applied it, and you kept doing heavy attacks, right? You would keep that consistent taunt going, and it wouldn't fall off, it wouldn't lag off. It was perfect for that. And it allowed you to play tanking a different way than just poking them with the sword to taunt them and getting this major breach and major fracture. Now, the next big change in it is the Ancient Knowledge. So, Ancient Knowledge, Frost Staffs now. Equipping a Frost Staff reduces the cost of your blocking by 36% and increases the amount of damage you can block by 20. The same thing that I had before, which is the equivalent to Sword and Shield blocking. Okay? Really nice. Still leaves the Ice Staff a really good tanking beginner weapon, which the Tri-Focus and this together really allow for that kind of play, and I like that. The next thing is when you absorb a damage using the Destruction Staff damage shield, you restore 1800 Magicka. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. Now, that I really like too when it comes to the Ice Staff. That was the other thing I really liked about Ice Staff tanking, was you had this way of resource management with your damage shield, which played perfectly into ice tanking. Alright, now, going over abilities. We're going to start with Force Shock, because this is one, nothing really changed with it. You know, it still does the frost damage, you know, the flame, frost, and shock damage on all three, and all that, and the two morphs, still the same. So you have Crushing Shock, which interrupts and puts the caster off balance. Still the best tanking tool a tank can use is Crushing Shock, or even a support person. And then you have Force Pulse, which is more of the DPS side, because now you can inflict damage on two nearby enemies as well, and they can get Burning Chill or Concuss. So it's like, you know, or they have, if they have Burning Chill and Concuss, you do damage to multiple enemies. The whole point here is that it's like you got this DPS version and you got this support tank version. I really like that they left that alone. Alright, moving on to the next skill, and this is the one I have the biggest complaint with. First off, Wall of Elements, or Unstable Wall of Elements, this one now deals ice damage. The Frost Unstable Wall deals less damage, but grants damage shields and immobilizes chilled enemies. That's great, okay? The fact that it will still immobilize chilled enemies, but they took away the slow that it had. And it had like a 30% slow on it, which was nice, because you could stack it with other slows, and it made it really effective, and even more effective than that. Now, Blockade of Frost, this one deals less damage, but grants the damage shield right away, and the immobilizes chilled enemies. I still like that they have that factor attached, the immobilizing chilled enemies, but it's the fact that chilled now applies brittle, which is nice, but also it's a positive and a negative at the same time. And that's, I know a lot of people won't agree with me on this, but it's the fact that they took away the one thing that made Ice Staff stand out above fire and lightning, is the fact that it had more controlling capabilities. The one class that's going to be able to really pull this off, and it always will, is the Ice Warden. So playing an Ice Mage as a Warden is the most powerful way to use this, and because now you're going to get even more ways of applying chilled because of the class itself. So it's nice that they left that effect, but it still kind of diminishes it. I don't like they added the shields to this. I honestly don't. I think I would have left the damage and the CC controlling effect and then put a damage shield on here. They should have just stuck with the damage shield idea on Resto Staff. And no offense to anyone who uses these things, but Blessing of Protection, which is a wall spell that heals people that are standing in it, would have been a much better ability to move a shield to. And then the shield stuff, they could have changed to a new ability for the Resto Staff. Maybe an ability that did the same thing as Combat Prayer here. One of them is a morph that when you cast it, the ability, what it does is it applies a damage buff to your two. It can cast that Minor Berserk to two of your allies. Instead of having Minor Berserk on the Resto Staff's main heal, like burst heal, put it into a different area. I think that would have been better to put the shields here, and then make this one a heal with the ability of giving the shields afterwards with an extra heal on top of it, or like healing effect. So you get like this better heal from this one, and this one gives you the heal plus the shield. So this gives you the heal and shield, but it also gives you an extra heal at the end after the shield in, like not the shield ends, but the effect of the skill ends. Then it heals again after the 13 seconds is up. You know, it keeps the shield applied, like it'll keep the shield up for the duration too. So it's like, I think it would have been better there than putting on the wall elements. That's just my opinion. I know a lot of people won't agree with me, but hey, as an ice tank, and a dedicated one at that, I can tell you Wall of Elements was better as a CC crowd control than it is as a support skill. Alright, next ability, Destructive Touch. So Destructive Touch got some interesting changes. So the ice version here, Reach, still does the damage up front, and it does damage over 10 seconds, additional damage, which makes it really good for a DPS skill. And then you have the Destructive Clench, which now Frost Clench also immobilizes and taunts the enemy for a duration of 15 seconds. So you get a 15-second taunt with this, and the thing that makes Frost Clench so nice is it does immobilize the enemy. So it gives you that crowd control. A lot of people think that a tank's job is to lower the resistances of the enemy because it's on Sword and Shield. No, that's just the perk of Sword and Shield. That's the perk of Sword and Shield's taunt. The perk of Ice Staff taunting and tanking is immobilization, slowing and immobilizing the enemies, so you can keep them together and keep them compacted better than you can with Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield takes a lot more resources to do that, to gather people up, put them together. This allows you to slow them, get them built into a pack, and then burn them down. So you get these two different ways of tanking between Sword and Shield and Ice Staff. And it's one of the reasons why I liked Ice Staff tanking way more than Sword and Shield tanking, was Sword and Shield felt too easy to me, where Ice Staff was a lot more complicated when they first implemented it on the the heavy attack taunting and all this other stuff. And I really like this because now I can cast this taunt, immobilize, and I can stop the enemy where they're at. I can boom. You can't move, buddy, for so many seconds. And because they're immobilized, they get chilled. So it's like all these different things get applied because of my wall of elements too. So it's a really cool, the effect that you get this. You get the wall of elements, which chills enemies, that immobilizes chilled enemies, and then you get a taunt with an immobilized. So it's that idea that you get this really good crowd control capabilities. The next ability is weakness elements, and this is by far the best taunt you can have, or damage reduction, single target damage reduction tool you can have in the game. So, not weakness elements, but elemental susceptibility. The reason why it's so good is anytime that this enemy takes damage, any damage they receive, it reapplies the maximum duration of 30 seconds, or 20 seconds on the major breach, major fracture now. This is the best one you can use in the game. Because you apply this to an enemy, like a boss, it's on there until the end of the fight. It's never coming off. As long as people focus damage on it, it stays continuous. It is the best single target, again, one. This is what I use for tanking. When I tank as an Ice Staff tank, I put this on the boss at the beginning of the fight. I don't have to apply it again. Because it would get major, at the time, major breach was just spell resistance. But now breach does both, spell and physical. That's why this is now the best breach and physical and spell resistance debuff in the game. Because it is continuous as long as you're dealing damage. And trust me, when you have 5 wall of elements down, or 4 element wall of elements, you have a bunch of other stuff, and you have a bunch of AoEs and a bunch of dots being applied to that boss, it will never come off. Every time it takes damage, it's getting reapplied for 20 seconds. So it's a great one. Now, Elemental Drain is a good one for like support characters to use, or anyone who's offering support in getting that Minor Magicka Steel. But Minor Magicka Steel did get a slight nerf, and I say a slight nerf because to me, you never really noticed much of a difference if you didn't build for resource management to begin with in your character. You wouldn't notice this too much. A lot of people say, oh, I noticed it. No, you don't. Because that's only 200 magicka to your 3,000 you're spending. So it was just a chunk being taken off of your ability. It was never enough to compensate for the casting of abilities. It's a nice ability, but you have to reapply it every 20 seconds. This you don't. Next up, Impulse. Another great ability with its changes. So first you have the Elemental Ring. Now this one, you release a surge of elemental energy, dealing X amount of damage to the target location, at the target location where you are. Frost Ring provides minor protection. That's I think it's a 5% damage mitigation for you and your allies standing in the ring. So if you're tanking and you use this, boom, minor protection to you and your group. Shock is even just as good because now it increases, the damage is increased based on the number of enemies hit. So the more enemies you hit, the more damage it deals. Fire Ring deals additional damage to burning and low health enemies. So it's actually got a AoE kind of, and I don't want to say it's an AoE execute because it's not, but if they're burning and they're low health, they're going to take extra damage, which is really good. So Fire and Lightning still share that high DPS output, while Frost now offers more group support with this idea of protection. I like that, and I think this is what I would have done with the Resto Staff, is created a done the Resto Staff to do the shields on the protection, on the restoration skill, or on the blessing and protection skill. I would have had it do the shields, and I would have had it do the heal and stuff, and then I would have turned this into the major protection kind of thing. So this way, Ice can still keep its personality of being a CC, crowd control type weapon with DPS attached. That's what I would have done here. I would have made it to where when you did the AoE Pulsar, or the Elemental Ring, it immobilized enemies, or it chilled enemies. So this way, they'd get immobilized, or, you know, get those different effects. I think that would have been really cool. Now, Pulsar is the one, I believe this is the one where you cast it around yourself. Yeah, Pulsar casts around yourself. This one casts it at an area. So this has a range of 28 meters. This one is your target area. So I got those backwards. So this is the one where you cast it at a distance. So it's great for the Frost Ring because you can place it for your group, you know, for your allies and stuff. This is really good for tank. And that's why I liked this one, was because of the fact that you had a really good way of applying those different things. And it applies Minor Mangle as well. So this one applies minor protection for your allies and minor mangle on your enemies, reducing their max health by 10% for 7 seconds. This is a great ability for that purpose of tanking. The minor mangle on there, and then the minor protection for the Ice Staff, and then even for the if you're tanking with a Fire Staff or a Lightning Staff, you still get the minor mangle, but you get this greater damage capability. So it's kind of that trade-off that you got to look at when it comes to tanking with the different weapons and how you use them again. But I like how they implemented that stuff. But I do think Ice should have had more to do with shield, more with immobilizing targets, more with crowd controlling. Like, they should have put the crowd control from maybe Wall of Elements, just moved it off and put it on here. So when you're in a group of enemies and you pulsar them, it slows them. Like, you're right there, you're hitting them with this ice hardcore, blasting from you. Make that the thing that does it. Now, if you don't know, like, again, like I said, some of these abilities, a lot of people don't understand how they work. So that's the Pulsar one, the Ring of Elements. And as you can see, it blasts outwards from you. So it gives you a really good AoE blast and everything, which is nice. Now, the best, hands down, ultimate for tanking, besides the northern storm for the Warden, is this, the Eye of the Storm. When it was ice, it was awesome, because it allowed you to create a better area of effect. CC immobilization, again, just deals damage. But if you had all the other effects down, you kept up a greater chance of applying chilled, which did immobilize enemies. So it's a really good ability for that purpose when you're tanking. And if you have a Wall of Elements down and this on you as well, you drop that Wall of Elements, you stand in the middle of it, keeping enemies on you, and this going, and you get that double chilling effect, which immobilizes. So it, like, again, it holds people in place better. That's the thing I liked about Eye of the Storm. You could do the same thing with Elemental Rage, which was nice as well, because Icy Rage immobilizes enemies hit for 3 seconds, which is perfect. But this one, the Storm casts above you and follows you wherever you move. It doesn't do that same thing. Icy Rage immobilizes enemies hit for 3 seconds. That's great. But the Icy Rage should have been put on Eye of the Eye of the Storm, and something else put here. Maybe just put the chill effect. I don't know, but there should have been something else in that sense. So it's interesting that they did that with that. But I still think Eye of the Storm is one of the best abilities besides the Wardens for ice AoE stuff. Now, Fighters Guild or Mages Guild does have the Meteor, and it also has the Meteor morph of Shooting Star, which is also frost, or not Shooting Star, Ice Comet, which is also frost damage. But it has a knockback, so this is really good, and it stuns people for 2 seconds, and it gives them the CC movement speed of 50% for 5 seconds. It's nice, but it's still Ultimate's a lot harder to get than it is Magicka. So if you don't have this up and ready when you start a fight or you start an encounter, it's kind of like, okay, it's good, but if there's trash in the fight, that's where it plays its best role. Like if there's a boss encounter and there's a lot of trash with it, that's where these things play their best effect. And a lot of people will say, well, that's not very many boss encounters. That's a lot of boss encounters that actually do have a lot of adds throughout the game, and it does add that controlling effect even to certain bosses and certain trash mobs and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a nice trade-off. But I really wish they would have left more crowd control attached to the Wall of Elements, or more CC, or even in this case more controlling effect for the Ice Staff to give it greater play in a tank's hand. And then also those players who want to play DPS still have that tool to DPS with it. Reducing the amount of damage ice does isn't the way to make it a more tank weapon. To make it more of a tank weapon, you need to add more controlling effect to it. And that's where I feel like they've faltered with the changes to the Destruction Staff, because I hate to say this, none of this is going to change. I doubt the devs will change anything about Destruction Staff before the release. I think everything's staying as is. I think that this is their plan for Destruction Staff going forward. Ice Staff to be a weak tank weapon and support weapon, while I can do more DPS with a Resto Staff than I can an Ice Staff. Which is sad. And it's all because it has a greater channel effect of its damage on its heavy attack than the Ice Staff now has on its Wall of Elements. Because I can lay down a bunch of AoEs and heavy attack through them and get as much, if not more, DPS out of a Resto Staff than I can this. And that's what irritates me the most. It's supposed to be a Destruction Staff. It's supposed to be a damage-dealing tool. But you take away the damage, majority of its damage capability, and nobody will want to use it other than for the purpose of tanking. I understand the devs saying they want to make it more of a tank support weapon. That's fine. You can do that. You can still give it more support and more tanking capabilities than removing its DPS, removing its damage. I think that's what the big problem was a lot of people were like, well, this makes the Ice Staff a more desirable weapon for tanking because it allows you to kill things faster than with Sword and Shield. Well, that's kind of the point. It gives you a different way to tank. And it's kind of like when people say, oh, well, you can only tank with Sword and Shield and Destruction Staff now because they're the only things with taunts. No, because you have a taunt in the Undaunted skill line, and you have crowd control and CC and other weapons too. And you have, so you have you have control and other abilities as well, other weapon abilities. And so just not Sword and Shield and Destruction Staff have that capability. They're just the easier ones to apply those things that people think you need, like the Major Breach, Major Fracture, and that kind of stuff. But anyone can literally use weakness elements. Any person in a group can do that. Not just a tank, not just a healer, anyone. Because you're going to wind up sacrificing your DPS anyways in some way, shape, or form to apply buffs and debuffs for yourself. So if you're doing it to apply a debuff for your group, that increases your DPS as well. So when you hear all these things, like a lot of people saying, it's a tank's job, it's a tank's job. It's not a tank's job. This right here is a control skill, yes, but it isn't, like, it's not attached to anything else. Like I said, Breach is now on the Alliance War Assault skill, Caltrops, which, by the way, devs finally got it working. So it is now working again as intended, and it still does apply the Breach effect to the target. For some reason, it's just not showing it on the tooltips. Oh, I don't have the... That's right. Sorry, my bad. I don't have the add-ons, or not add-ons, the interface turned on for... Not interface. What is that? Combat stuff turned on for that? No, I do. See, it should be showing it. Because it shows the shield, it just doesn't show the negative effect of me doing that on them. So. But yeah, I really enjoyed Ice Staff tanking the way it was when it was first introduced. I did, because I took the time to learn how to do it really well, and only focused on Ice Staff tanking with the Warden. And then I tried it with Nightblade. It worked really good on Nightblade. And then I tried it with Necromancer. It was really good on Necromancer as well. So it was like, God, man, I got all these different classes that work really good with Ice Staff tanking. It's not that Templar didn't do good with it, or Dragon Knight. It's just like, or Sorcerer. Sorcerer works better with the Lightning Staff, hands down. Dragon Knights work better with Fire Staffs, and the Templar actually works better with a Resto Staff. So it's like you get this, you get three classes that work really good with one staff. The rest work with other staffs really good. So you play off that, you create around it, and then even playing a Fire Staff tank, even playing a DK tank using Ice Staff, you could get away with a little bit more because there were certain sets that played into the idea of fire and ice, which made a really interesting tank combination. So you'd use fire on the back bar, ice on the front bar, and you get this really cool combo. And especially with some of the set bonuses from certain things, you could get some really cool procs as well. So, but yeah, that's my big gripe with the Ice Staff. It just doesn't feel like it did before, when you'd put down your, like your wall of elements, and everything, you had this really good thing, you had this great CC crowd control effect, and there's the shield. Ooh, look at me, I got a shield that can defend me against ranged attacks. Okay, I can do this and get the same thing, if not better. Because you also look at the shield strength that it gives you with Defrost for that purpose. And I don't think it's that much. Yeah, okay, so it's 4,059 damage from that. But my heavy attacks does almost the same thing. And that's without CP. As soon as you start dumping CP into the blue tree, red tree, the Bastion. So we'll do like I normally do. I put 40 points into this. And now you go in and you look at the Trifocus, and that's 5K. Then you look at this one, and yeah, it might go up to 5,204. This is 200 less. The heavy attack is still better, and this protects you from all damage. So it's nice that they put this shield there, but this is only from ranged attacks. So yeah, I get this ranged defense and everything. But yeah, you guys get the idea. Like, I literally had to train myself to master, master my own technique of tanking with an ice staff. Because everybody's going to tank differently with tools. Some people will look at ice staff and be like, oh, well, it's not as effective as sword and shield because it doesn't get the same benefits that sword and shield does. Well, yeah, it's because it's a different weapon. It's like, it would be like saying that DKs tank the same as Templars. They don't, because they have different perks and benefits that you don't get with other weapons or other classes. So yeah, it's going to play differently. You have to train yourself to tank with it. And tanking with Ice Staff to me was way more fun, way more intriguing, way more entertaining than tanking with Sword and Shield, because Sword and Shield has its offense if you use it offensively, and it has its defense if you use its defense correctly. So if you use them correctly, like, they offer great tools for those purposes. But at the same time, Ice Staff just had a more interesting way of tanking. Kind of like now, like, I've tanked with almost every weapon in the game, and I can tell you, tanking with a bow is way different than tanking with a sword and shield. It is way different than tanking with an ice staff, fire staff, lightning staff, two-handed, all that stuff. And that's because of its skills that are attached to it that give it tanking capability and a little bit more. So you get more flexibility out of this tool for different, in a different way than you do destruction staff or two-handed or one-handed sword and shield. And like you said, you have to find what works best for you when it comes to tanking. And if you like to tank with destruction staff, Ice Staff is hands down the easiest to learn with and the best to learn how to tank with until you get comfortable with playing the mechanics of the game. And once you get comfortable with playing the mechanics of the game, switching to your dedicated staff for your class, like Warden, you're not going to change. Ice Staff is hands down the better weapon to tank with. Just like using a Resto Staff is really good for them as well. Playing a healer type, like nature support type character, like, then you get that benefit. But Lightning Staff plays really well into Sork because they do gain extra damage from it, but then you get the different benefits from using lightning, like, effects from this that play well with the Sork, just like using fire and fire damage from the DK and the Fire Staff. It works, like, you get this really good balance. And yeah, can you tank with a Fire Staff on a DK? Yes, really good. Can you tank with a Fire Staff on a Templar? Not as good. Can you tank with a Fire Staff on a Nightblade? Not as good. And that's because of the way the staffs play with each of the classes, and how the classes can take advantage of each of the staff types when it comes to that role. So, you know, a lot of people say, yeah, but isn't Fire Staff more of a DPS weapon? Yeah, in the hands of a DPS it is. But in the hands of a tank, it becomes a more effective tank weapon with DPS attached. Just like with anything. I mean, even Sword and Shield, when people say, oh, it's a tank weapon, it's a tank weapon with damage. Okay, you got every ability you have almost deals damage besides one, and that is defensive posture. Even your shield wall doesn't do a lot of damage or doesn't deal damage, but it still has that ability to increase your damage capabilities without wasting resources. So you get a lot more DPS out of it. The Destruction Staff has the same thing. One ability that doesn't do any damage whatsoever, but has this great, you know, offensive capability or defensive capability, however you look at it, because it puts that negative debuff on your enemies. Two-handed has a lot of the same characteristics on different things, on different abilities, and that's because of, like, some skills, just looking at them. Like Uppercut, for example, if you look at the two morphs, Dizzying Swing versus Wrecking Blow. Wrecking Blow is definitely built for DPS, while Dizzying Swing is definitely made for knocking people off guard, giving them off balance, and snaring them for 40% of their movement for so many seconds. Like, that's the point of it. It's about setting people off balance. That's a tank's job. So using that is great for a tank. Then when you look at things like critical charge, you have Stampede and you have critical rush. Critical rush, definitely DPS. Stampede, greater for the tank because it applies an area of effect damage underneath the enemy, which is nice because it adds group AoE DPS. So it's a nice effect that you can do. But again, I'm not going to go through every weapon. We're here to talk about Destruction Staff and its main purpose when it comes to tanking, and the changes to Ice Staff and how I feel about them. And that's pretty much how I feel. Like, Ice Staff could be good if it didn't lose its main function as more of a controlling weapon and a damage weapon. So damage control is what it should have been with support attached. The same thing when it comes to fire and lightning. They're damage weapons primarily with support attached, with some support attached, but their main focus is DPS. When it comes to ice, it should have been control, damage, support. Support should have been third. Damage and control should have been the primary focus of the staff. And it does have more control now than, or not more control, it has better control now with the changes to the destructive clinch and such. Even destructive clinch on a fire staff and shock staff have their beneficial effects and stuff. So, but that's pretty much it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, you guys know what's coming next. Go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. And if you do subscribe, I do suggest you hit that notification bell to be notified when I do post new videos. This helps my channel grow. It also helps you guys be notified when I do that. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.